The air in Austin, Texas, carried the faint hum of spring, blooming bluebonnets, the distant strum of live music from 6th Street, and the quiet unease settling into Jake Harper's life. At 38, Jake was the kind of man who wore his work boots to bed, figuratively speaking. His construction company, Harper Builds, was his pride, transforming the city's skyline one steel beam at a time. But lately, his home, a sleek, modern two-story building in the hills, felt less like a sanctuary and more like a puzzle with missing pieces. Jake's wife Emily was his high school sweetheart, the woman who'd once laughed at his bad jokes and sketched floor plans for their dream home on napkins. They'd built that home, but somewhere along the way, Emily's warmth had cooled. She'd started leaving her phone face down on the kitchen counter, a small act that gnawed at Jake like termites in a foundation. Her hazel eyes, once so open, now darted away when he asked about her day. And her perfume, a sharp floral scent she'd never worn before, lingered in the air like an uninvited guest. It was the little things at first. Emily stopped asking about Jake's projects, no longer curious about the downtown condo tower or the eco-friendly school he was bidding on. She'd always been his sounding board, but now her responses were clipped, distracted. "That's great, babe," she'd say, her fingers tapping out a message on her phone, lips curling into a private smile that didn't include him. When Jake asked who she was texting, she'd laugh it off. "Just the book club group chat. You wouldn't get it." The book club. That was another thing. Every Thursday night, Emily would slip into a sundress, grab her copy of some novel Jake had never heard of, and head to book club at a coffee shop in East Austin. She'd come home late, her cheeks flushed, talking vaguely about metaphors and prose. Jake wanted to believe her, but the way she avoided his gaze made his gut twist. He'd tried reading one of her books once, a literary thriller about betrayal. He didn't finish it. The parallels hit too close. And then there was Matt, Jake's best friend since college and business partner at Harper Builds. Matt was the charmer, the guy who could talk a client into a $1 million contract with a grin and a handshake. He'd been a constant in their lives, the one who toasted their wedding and helped them move into their first apartment. But lately, Matt's visits to the Harper house felt off. He'd swing by when Jake was at a job site, claiming he needed to drop off blueprints or fix a leaky faucet Emily had mentioned. "Just helping out, man," Matt would say, clapping Jake on the shoulder. But Jake noticed the way Matt's eyes lingered on Emily during their weekly barbecues, the way their laughter synced up a beat too long. The signs piled up like unpaid invoices. Matt had a new ride, a glossy black Tesla Model S that seemed extravagant for a guy who'd complained about cash flow last quarter. Emily's new perfume wasn't just a one-off, it was a routine, paired with outfits Jake hadn't seen before. Tight jeans, low-cut tops, nothing like the cozy sweaters she used to live in. And at their last barbecue, Jake caught something that made his blood run cold. Emily and Matt both glanced at their phones at the same time, their fingers moving in near-perfect sync, like they were responding to the same silent cue. Jake wasn't a paranoid man. He'd built his life on logic, on measurable outcomes, but doubt is a slow poison and it was seeping into every corner of his world. He started paying attention. The way Emily's phone buzzed at odd hours, her quick swipe to silence it, the way Matt's stories about his weekends were vague, always just chilling or out with some buddies, the way Emily's book club nights stretched later and later, her car pulling into the driveway well past midnight. It all came to a head on a humid April evening. Jake had been at a site all day overseeing a crane lift that ran late. He was bone-tired, but an idea sparked a rare night off to surprise Emily. He stopped by her favorite taco truck, grabbed 2 orders of barbacoa with extra cilantro, and drove home, imagining her smile when he walked through the door. Maybe they'd crack open a bottle of wine, talk like they used to. Maybe he was overthinking everything. The house was quiet when he stepped inside, the kind of quiet that feels staged. Emily's purse was on the counter, her phone beside it, screen dark but unlocked, a rare slip. Jake set the tacos down, his boots heavy on the hard wood. "Em?" he called. No answer. Upstairs, a floorboard creaked. He climbed the stairs, his heart thudding louder than his steps. In their bedroom, Emily stood by the bed, her back to him, holding a navy blazer that didn't belong to Jake. Her phone was in her other hand, the screen glowing. Jake's eyes locked on it, catching the tail end of a text before she could hide it. Forgot my jacket upstairs. Don't tell Jay I stopped by. M. Time slowed. The blazer, the text, the way Emily's shoulders stiffened when she realized he was there. "Jake," she said, turning, her voice a mix of panic and guilt. "You're home early?" "Whose jacket is that?" His voice was steady, but inside he was fracturing. Emily's lips parted, but no words came. She set the blazer on the bed, her hands trembling. It's Matt's. He dropped by to talk about the downtown bid. He left it by mistake." Jake stepped closer, his eyes never leaving hers. "Show me the phone." "Jake, don't show me." She hesitated, then handed it over, her fingers brushing his like a confession. The text thread with Matt was a gut punch. Messages about meeting at their spot, about how Jake was too busy to notice. One from last week. "Miss you already, can't wait for Thursday." Jake's vision blurred, not with tears but with rage. "How long?" he asked, his voice low, dangerous. Emily sank onto the bed, her face crumpling. "A few months," she whispered. "It just happened. You're always at work, Jake. Always gone. Matt was here. He listened." "Listened?" Jake's laugh was bitter, sharp. "He's my best friend, Em. My partner. And you're blaming me?" "I'm not blaming you," she said, tears spilling now. I was lonely. I didn't mean for it to go this far." Jake stared at her, the woman he'd loved for half his life, now a stranger, holding another man's jacket. The tacos were cold downstairs. The house was too quiet, and somewhere Matt was probably checking his phone, waiting for a reply that would never come. The Austin skyline glittered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Jake Harper's office, but the view offered no comfort. The betrayal he'd uncovered in his bedroom 2 nights ago had cracked something fundamental in him, not just his heart, but his trust in the world he'd built. Emily's tearful confession and Matt's damning text messages were shrapnel lodged in his chest, and Jake wasn't the kind of man to let wounds fester. He was a builder, a problem solver, and now he'd tear down the rot in his life with the same precision he used to erect skyscrapers. Jake sat at his desk, the weight of his next moves pressing against his temples. Harper Builds wasn't just a company, it was his legacy, co-founded with Matt, the man who'd been his brother in all but blood. Matt's betrayal wasn't just personal, it was professional. Jake had spent the last 48 hours digging, and what he found was worse than he'd imagined. Matt had been siphoning funds from the company, $173,000, 0 cents, over 6 months, funneled into offshore accounts to bankroll his new Tesla, lavish dinners, and apparently Emily's affection. The receipts were damning. Hotel bookings, jewelry invoices, even a weekend getaway to Napa that coincided with one of Emily's book club trips. Jake's stomach churned at the thought of them laughing behind his back, toasting their deceit with wine he'd indirectly paid for. But Jake wasn't here to wallow, he was here to act. He opened his laptop and pulled up the partnership agreement for Harper Builds. Tucked in the fine print was Clause 7, a safeguard he'd insisted on years ago when Matt's charm had seemed like a liability waiting to happen. It allowed Jake to buy back Matt's 40% stake at 20 cents on the dollar if Matt's actions materially damaged the company's reputation or operation. Infidelity with the CEO's wife? Embezzlement? That was more than enough. Jake's lawyer, a grizzled ex-Marine named Tom, had already drafted the paperwork. The evidence, screenshots of Matt's texts, bank records, and a forensic audit, was a guillotine ready to drop. Jake's phone buzzed, a text from Matt. "Can we talk, man? I messed up." Jake's jaw tightened. He didn't reply. Instead, he dialed Tom. "Set the meeting for noon," he said. "Matt's office. I want this done today." At home, Emily was a ghost in their shared space. She'd barely spoken since the confrontation, her eyes red-rimmed, her movements slow, like she was wading through regret. Jake couldn't look at her without seeing Matt's jacket in her hands, without hearing her excuse. I was lonely. He'd loved her fiercely, built a life for them, and she'd traded it for stolen moments with a man who'd never measure up. Last night, Jake had pulled their prenup from the safe. Emily had signed it a decade ago, back when they were young and broke, laughing about how they'd never need it. The infidelity clause was ironclad. If she cheated, she'd forfeit her claim to their shared assets, including her 10% stake in Harper Builds, the house, the savings, the company. It would all stay with Jake. She'd get the cabin in the hill country and a modest settlement, enough to start over, but not enough to keep her in the lifestyle Matt had promised. Jake didn't want revenge. He wanted justice. But as he drove to the office, the weight of it all, Emily's tears, Matt's betrayal, the life he'd thought was his, threatened to crush him. He pulled over on a quiet stretch of Mopic Expressway, gripping the steering wheel until his knuckles whitened. For the first time in years, Jake Harper cried. Not loud sobs, but a quiet, shuddering release, the kind that comes when you realize the people you loved most were never who you thought. He let it out, then wiped his face, straightened his shoulders, and drove on. There was work to do. The noon meeting was a surgical strike. Matt sat across from Jake in the conference room, his usual swagger gone, replaced by a nervous twitch in his jaw. Tom stood by the door, arms crossed, a silent enforcer. Jake slid the audit report across the table. "You stole from us," he said, his voice cold. $173,000. You used it to play house with my wife. Matt's face paled. "Jake, I can explain." "Don't." Jake pushed the buyback agreement forward. Clause 7. "Your actions tanked our reputation. I'm buying your shares. 20 cents on the dollar. Sign it or I go public with the embezzlement. You'll be lucky to get a job flipping burgers." Matt's eyes darted to Tom, then back to Jake. "You're my best friend," he whispered. "We built this together." "You stopped being my friend when you crossed that line." Jake leaned forward, his voice a blade. "Sign. Now." Matt's hand shook as he scrawled his name. Jake felt no satisfaction, only a hollow ache. He'd secured the company, locked in major clients with personal contracts that sidelined Matt's influence, but the victory tasted like ash. Matt was out, a shadow of the man who'd once stood at Jake's side. That evening, Jake returned home to face Emily. She was in the kitchen, packing a suitcase, her movements deliberate, like she was trying to hold herself together. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice breaking. "I know I ruined everything." Jake handed her the divorce papers. "You signed the prenup. You knew the consequences. The cabin's yours. You'll get enough to start over. That's it." Emily's sobs filled the room, raw and desperate. "I still love you, Jake. I was stupid, but I love you." He wanted to believe her, wanted to pull her close and pretend they could rebuild. But love doesn't survive lies like hers. "You loved the idea of me," he said quietly, "not the man I am." He turned and walked out, leaving her to her tears. Outside, the Texas stars burned bright, indifferent to the wreckage below. Jake climbed into his truck, the weight of his new reality settling in. He'd lost his wife, his best friend, and the life he'd known, but he still had Harper Builds, still had his hands to create, his will to endure. The road ahead was uncertain, but Jake Harper was no stranger to hard work. He'd rebuild, brick by brick, even if it broke him first. The Austin sun hung low, casting long shadows over the city Jake Harper had helped shape. Harper Builds stood taller than ever, its logo emblazoned on cranes dotting the skyline. But Jake's heart was no longer in the concrete and steel. The betrayal of Emily and Matt had left scars, not just on his soul, but on the life he'd once envisioned. He'd dismantled their treachery with surgical precision. Matt's shares bought out, Emily's divorce finalized, but victory hadn't brought peace. It had brought clarity. Jake was done building for others. It was time to rebuild himself. 6 months after the divorce, Jake made a move that stunned the industry. He sold Harper Builds to Drift Shade Limited, a rising star in sustainable construction, for $17 million, 0 cents. The deal was a masterstroke. Jake secured a 2-year role as a strategic advisor, ensuring his vision for the company lived on, and retained his key client relationships locking in his influence. The sale wasn't about cashing out, it was about freedom. The money was a tool, a means to carve out a life on his terms. He walked away from the closing meeting with a quiet resolve, the weight of his old life lifting with every step. Matt's fall was as swift as it was brutal. The $600,000 0-cent stake he'd held in Harper Builds once his ticket to wealth was reduced to a paltry $120 0 under Clause 7. The embezzlement scandal, though never publicized, had leaked just enough to taint his name in Austin's tight-knit business circles. Clients who once fawned over his charm now dodged his calls. Matt tried to pivot, launching a consulting firm with a flashy website and bold promises. But the industry had no patience for a man who'd burned his bridges. By winter, his Tesla was repossessed, his loft downtown listed for sale. Whispers at industry mixers painted him as a cautionary tale, a man who'd gambled everything and lost. Emily's unraveling was quieter but no less devastating. The cabin in the hill country, her only solace from the divorce, became a gilded cage. The settlement Jake had given her, generous by legal standards, but meager compared to her old life, couldn't sustain the designer handbags or rooftop brunches she'd grown accustomed to. Matt, stripped of his wealth and charisma, was no longer the escape she'd imagined. Their affair, once fueled by secrecy and thrill, crumbled under the weight of reality. By spring, they were done, their final fight echoing through a cheap motel room where Matt had been crashing. Emily moved to Dallas, chasing a fresh start, but her social media, once a curated gallery of glamour, went silent, a testament to her faded dreams. Jake, meanwhile, was writing a new chapter. A year after the sale, he left Austin's bustle for a cedar-planked cabin on the banks of the Colorado River, just outside Bastrop. The property was rugged, unpolished, like him. He traded his tailored suits for flannel and denim, his boardroom battles for the hum of a different kind of work. In the garage, a 1967 Harley-Davidson Panhead sat in pieces, its chrome tarnished but salvageable. Restoring it became Jake's therapy, each wrench turn a step toward healing. The bike wasn't just metal, it was a metaphor, proof that broken things could be made whole again. His son Ethan was the anchor in this new life. At 16, Ethan was a lanky mix of Jake's grit and Emily's creativity, a kid who loved sketching comics and riding dirt bikes. The divorce had hit him hard, but Jake was determined to rebuild their bond. Weekends were sacred. Ethan would drive up from Austin, where he lived with Emily's sister, and they'd fish the river, grill burgers, or tinker with the Harley. One evening, as the sun dipped below the pines, Ethan looked at Jake, his voice tentative. "You seem lighter, Dad. Like you're okay again." Jake ruffled his son's hair, swallowing the lump in his throat. "Getting there, kid," he said. "Getting there." The wealth from the sale, millions tucked into investments and a modest trust for Ethan, gave Jake independence, but it was the lessons that truly enriched him. Trust, he'd learned, was a currency more fragile than gold. He'd given it freely to Emily and Matt, only to watch them squander it. Now, he guarded it fiercely, offering it only to those who earned it. Ethan, his old crew at Harper Builds, the river that never lied. He wasn't bitter, though. The pain had forged him. Stripped away the naive man who'd once believed love and loyalty were guarantees. One crisp fall evening, Jake sat on his porch, the Harley's engine rumbling softly in the driveway after a successful test run. The stars above the Colorado were sharp, endless, a reminder of how small his troubles were in the grand scheme. He sipped a Shinerbach, the bottle cool against his palm, and thought about the man he'd been a year ago. Angry, broken, betrayed. That man was gone, replaced by someone stronger, wiser, unafraid to start over. The Harley roared as he revved it, a sound that echoed through the pines like a promise. Jake Harper wasn't done building, not by a long shot. But this time, he was building for himself. In the heart of Austin, Texas, beneath a sky ablaze with the hues of sunset, Jake Harper's story unfolds, a raw, heart-rending epic of betrayal, resilience, and the indomitable human spirit that speaks directly to the American soul. This is no mere tale of loss. It's a profound reflection of our shared fears, hopes, and the courage it takes to rise from ruin. When Jake's world collapsed under the weight of his wife Emily's infidelity and his best friend Matt's treachery, he stood at the edge of despair, his heart shattered by those he loved most. Yet, from the rubble of his broken life, Jake forged lessons that resonate with every American who has ever faced heartbreak and dared to rebuild. His journey, a tapestry woven with pain, action, and redemption, will grip your heart, bring tears to your eyes, and leave you inspired to claim your own destiny. Jake's life once rested on the sacred bonds he shared with Emily and Matt, late-night dreams, laughter over shared beers, and the quiet trust of years built a foundation he believed was unbreakable. But in a single gut-wrenching moment, it all unraveled. Emily's hidden texts, Matt's stolen funds, a blazer left carelessly on a bed that wasn't his. Trust, the cornerstone of Jake's existence, revealed itself as a fragile treasure, one that could be shattered by those he held closest. This betrayal cuts deep, mirroring a fear etched in the American psyche. We pour our souls into relationships, believing loyalty is assured, only to learn it's a choice others must uphold. Jake's pain was a living wound, each memory of misplaced faith a fresh stab, but he refused to let it define him. Instead, he redefined trust as a gift to be earned, not blindly given. His bond with his son Ethan became a sacred refuge, built on honest moments under the starlit Texas sky, where tales of galaxies replaced the lies of his past. Jake's quiet evenings with Ethan, their laughter mingling with the night air, teach us that trust, though fragile, can be reborn with those who prove worthy. A truth that will tug at the heart of anyone who has ever had to rebuild faith after betrayal. When Jake faced the wreckage of his life, Emily clutching Matt's jacket, the truth of their deception laid bare. The pain was visceral, a fire in his chest that threatened to consume him. He could have surrendered, let the betrayal cast him as a victim for life. But Jake, a builder by both trade and spirit, chose action over despair. He unearthed Matt's embezzlement, used legal savvy to reclaim his company, and held Emily accountable through their prenup's terms. This wasn't revenge, it was ownership, a refusal to let others script his fate. In a nation that often urges us to suppress our pain, Jake's story is a revelation. His tears, shed alone on the Mopac Expressway, were not weakness, but a testament to his humanity. He felt the full weight of his loss, then channeled it into change, selling his empire, restoring a vintage Harley, carving a new life by the Colorado River. These acts of defiance against despair speak to the American spirit, where true strength lies not in denying hurt, but in moving through it. The image of Jake, hands blackened with grease, breathing life into his Harley's engine, is a powerful call to anyone who has felt broken. You are not what breaks you, but what you choose to build next. His story will resonate with every American who has found the courage to act, to rise, to reclaim their power. Selling Harper Builds for $17 million, 0 cents, was not about wealth for Jake, it was about liberation. He shed the weight of a life that no longer fit, the endless work, the naive trust, the blindness to the cracks in his world. His cedar cabin by the Colorado River, the deep growl of his restored panhead, the simple joy of a Shiner Bock on his porch, these were the pillars of a new Jake, a man who had lost everything and found himself in the ashes. Reinvention, so central to the American dream, comes at a cost, and Jake paid dearly. He lost the skyline he'd helped craft, the wife he'd sworn to love, the friend he'd called kin. Yet, in that loss, he found a clarity no fortune could buy, a life built for himself, anchored by Ethan's laughter and the river's timeless truth. Jake's transformation is a tear-soaked testament to redemption, not by erasing the past, but by building anew atop its ruins. Picture him on his porch, the Harley's rumble weaving through the pines, a man not just surviving but thriving, his scars a map of resilience and rebirth. This image will break your heart and heal it in the same breath, a reminder that redemption is possible when you dare to become your own architect. Jake Harper's story is a symphony of sorrow, strength, and salvation, echoing in the soul of every American who has faced life's trials and refused to break. He teaches us that trust, though easily shattered, can be carefully rebuilt, that action is the only path beyond victimhood, and that reinvention, though painful, is the road to redemption. Jake is more than a man from Austin, he is the embodiment of the American spirit. Battered but never broken, always rising, always chasing the light. Close your eyes and see him now, framed against a fiery Texas sunset, watching Ethan race across the grass, the Harley's roar blending with his son's joyful laughter. It's a moment that will catch in your throat, tears falling not from sorrow, but from the profound truth that even when life crumbles, you can rebuild. Stronger, wiser, ready to ride into the horizon, not as a victim, but as the master of your own fate. Jake didn't just survive. He found meaning in the fragments of his shattered world, and in doing so he hands us the courage to do the same. His story is a gift, a clarion call that no matter how deep the wounds, the human spirit can rise, rebuild, and roar back to life.